Thank you all for joining me today to talk about light and wellness. I am Greg Barrett with USAI Lighting, and today I'm presenting this AIA accredited presentation to discuss what designers need to consider when incorporating wellness focused lighting into projects to help make designs look, feel, and function their best. Before we get started, I have some standard AIA required slides to review. This course has been created and is owned by USAI Lighting. Whenever you're presenting this to your clients, please just make sure that USAI Lighting is aware and that you give USAI Lighting credit for all of the material. This course focuses on the science and design criteria that are essential for implementations of circadian-based design. This is a more intermediate to advanced level presentation. It's been designed to adjust the technical comfort of your audience, so you can morph and go as deep as you need to based on the subject matter expertise of who you're speaking to. The four main learning objectives that we're going to be addressing during this presentation are: one, to be able to define circadian rhythm and its impact on our sleep-wake cycle. The second learning objective is to be able to know what components of light have a circadian impact. The third, differentiate between two primary circadian metrics. And the last learning objective is to be able to execute 4 lighting design techniques to create circadian lighting. Now that we've gotten that required housekeeping out of the way, let me just ask you, how many of you have heard the term circadian? I'm sure most of you have. You may have heard it phrased as circadian lighting, circadian rhythms, light and health, light and wellness, or human-centric lighting, or HCL. You may have heard this from manufacturers, maybe designers, or even some health-minded customers. While all those terms aren't exactly the same, they're all speaking to the fact that light is a powerful influencer of how we impact how lighting impacts not just the visual perception of a space, but it actually has a direct impact on the mood, emotion, and physical health of the individual occupant. The term circadian rhythm refers to the body's internal clock that regulates many physiological processes, including our sleep-wake cycle. Although it is an internal clock, it's regulated by external cues, and the most important of which is light. To understand light's role in circadian entrainment and why it's so important to incorporate this into design practices, we need to consider how we actually evolved. Humans existed long before the invention of the light bulb or even candles, and our natural circadian rhythm was based on functioning during the day under cool, crisp sunlight, winding down for the evening under warm, dim rays of the setting sun, and either sleeping under the dim stars with almost no light to see, or by the warmth of a fireside. Now, contrast how we evolved with our modern world. Now, most people are working inside of offices, where most people don't have desks by the windows, or in the case of quarantine, at home in any spare space people can find. And then they spend their evenings in lit environments looking at bright screens. And the vast majority of our light now comes from artificial sources that are not in sync with our evolutionary regulator. The result is a chronically sleep-deprived culture. The CDC has actually classified sleep deprivation as a public health epidemic. 30 million Americans report interference with job performance. 75.5 million Americans report problems concentrating during the day. And there are also some serious health ramifications. Things such as obesity, depression, stress, anxiety, and many others. So the question that those in the design industry need to ask themselves is, what can we do to help? And we can rethink how we approach lighting design of spaces to take advantage of recent scientific research. And the benefits of rethinking that lighting are significant. A 2016 CBRE study looked at the effects of dynamic circadian system as part of their Healthy Offices project, and they studied this on 120 employees over the course of 7 months. The results were overwhelmingly positive. 76% of respondents felt happier. 71% felt more energetic. 50% felt healthier. And for the people that care about the analytics and the metrics, there was also an 18% measured increase in employee performance. It made a huge difference. But in order to take advantage of these benefits, first we need to understand why natural daylight provides circadian entrainment, but typical artificial lighting does not. And to do that, we need to take a look at human biology. The human eye has evolved to see a very specific portion of wavelengths within the entire electromagnetic spectrum. It's what we call visible light. It's roughly 400 nanometers to about 800 nanometers. It's from violet to red. And we see those wavelengths using our rods and cones. You might remember that phrase from back in high school. And those are the cells in our eyes that allow us to see. But there's actually a third type of photoreceptor that was only discovered in humans in 2001, so very recently. And it's the IPRGC. It stands for intrinsically photosensitive retinal ganglion cell. You don't need to remember all the acronyms, but that third photocell, it does not contribute to the visual system. So the question is, why is it there? What does it do? And they found that it has a very sensitive wavelength to blue light, and that it then sends the signal along with the rods and cones to a separate section of the brain away from the visual processing called the suprachiasmatic nucleus, or SCN for short. And the SCN is the body's clock that actually regulates our circadian system processes. This process signals our body on when to release hormones that impact things like our sleep, productivity, moods, appetite. And the most important hormone for our sleep-wake cycle is melatonin. You may have heard of melatonin. Sometimes doctors will actually prescribe melatonin for people who have trouble sleeping. And as you can see in this graph, melatonin production starts shortly before you fall asleep and drops right before you wake up. It's critically important for our sleep-wake cycle. And once researchers were able to map the process of this circadian light, they were able to begin to explore why some light impacts the circadian system while other light does not. One of the leading research institutions in light and health is the Lighting Research Center at Rensselaer Polytechnic Institute. It's in Troy, New York, and they found there are 5 main factors that determine the circadian impact of light. One of the most important lighting parameters is the spectrum of the light source, primarily the presence or the absence of those blue wavelengths. Remember that photosensitive cell was very sensitive to those blue wavelengths. And when sufficient quantities of blue wavelength light are present, melatonin production is suppressed, it drops, which keeps you awake and alert. When blue light is minimized, the body is able to produce melatonin, which assists you in going to sleep. You could think about the Apple night mode, the night shift mode that the iPhone has. Some of you may be using it. And what it does is it changes both the color and the intensity of the screen before you fall asleep. And that's to help your body to be able to produce melatonin. Mentioning those iPhone screens and how they reduce the intensity, the second critical parameter is the intensity of the source. We evolved under sunlight, which is incredibly bright during the day, and it's completely absent at night. And because of this evolutionary consideration, the intensity of the source has even more significant impact than the spectrum itself. Now, what matters when it comes to intensity is the intensity of the source at the eye. What matters is what's to the eye, not what's shining out on the table or on the floor or on a piece of artwork. What matters is what actually enters the eye. The next 3 important considerations are the timing. It's important when your body is exposed to the light and dark signals. And being exposed to light and dark at the wrong time results in your body's clock not matching your watch, which ends up making you feel like you have jet lag all the time. It also matters how long you're exposed to that light. Going out to grab the paper in the morning, it will not have as much of an impact as taking the dog for an hour-long walk. And it also matters what other light you've been exposed to that day. Your body almost has a light history memory, in a sense. If you spend the whole day in a dimly lit cave or office, a late night trip to a brightly lit Walmart will have more of an impact than if you spent your entire day out on the hiking trail. We've covered the science behind circadian lighting. So, how do you actually know if you're getting the light you need? Fortunately, there are a few measurable metrics that are now available. One of them is from the Lighting Research Center, and it's called the circadian stimulus metric. The circadian stimulus metric measures the percentage of melatonin that's suppressed after 1 hour of light exposure. They have a recommendation of greater than zero point 0.3 or greater than a 30% suppression in the morning, and less than zero point 0.1 or less than 10% suppression in the evening to allow your body to produce that melatonin. And they've developed a helpful online calculator for you to use to actually make sure that your circadian stimulus score is what it needs to be. The calculator is available at their website, lrc.rpi.edu. And the calculator allows you to input the spectrum of the light source, along with how much light is getting to the eye to determine what the circadian stimulus score of your space is. So you can use this calculator both in the design phase and in the post-occupancy phase when discussing with your clients to make sure that they're getting the right light levels that they need for true circadian entrainment. The other metric that's primarily in use is EML, and that stands for Equivalent Melanopic Lux. This metric has actually been adopted by the International Well Building Institute for their well building standard. Currently, most people seem to be using circadian stimulus. The industry has not yet settled on a firm standard. That gets us to our last key points here. How do you actually take that into account for your design? You'll hear a lot from manufacturers that you must use a tunable spectrum source to achieve circadian lighting. The truth is, you can actually achieve circadian lighting only using a static color temperature and changing the intensity. But tunable source spectrums do make it easier to achieve circadian entrainment. They're not absolutely required. So, for example, to achieve the recommended morning light exposure, you need about 2 times as much light at 3000 Kelvin or a warm white as you would at 4500 Kelvin or a daylight color temperature. So the result is you could have an overly lit space with a lot of wasted energy. What was a disadvantage of 3000 Kelvin or warm white during the day actually becomes an advantage at night because you can have twice the light and still achieve that nighttime circadian threshold. So you can have better visual acuity. And also by going to a warmer color temperature, it has a more aesthetic comfort. It's a little bit more relaxing of a color temperature. So tunable source spectrums, they help with energy, but they're not absolutely required from a scientific point. Some of the marketing materials out there, they'll make it seem like tunable lights alone are the solution. And the fact is, to achieve circadian impact, it takes a careful coordination of technology and design principles to make sure that light is getting to the eye. So that means that designers need to start thinking vertically with light, not just horizontal surfaces. Focusing on vertical could entail wall washes, using downlights with wider beam angles between 60 to 90 degrees that help get the light below the ridge of the eyebrows. Tabletop light sources that are close to the viewer. If you're sitting at a desk or a reading table, having that tabletop light source close to the eye really helps you get that light level that you need for circadian entrainment. The next key to remember is that teamwork is essential. It requires the entire team, the lighting designer, the architect, the integrator, the interior designer. But most importantly, it requires the end user whose commitment to circadian is required to keep it from being value engineered off the project, and also to make sure that the functionality is getting used day in, day out, so that they're seeing the benefits of their investment. And one of the reasons why the entire team needs to be involved is that the materials used in a space matter. Dark finishes don't reflect as much light and could require up to 2 times brighter light in a space than a space with lighter finishes, such as this bedroom. Also to consider is the duration in a location matters. We discussed that earlier that the length of time that you spend in the light matters. So talk to your client. Where are they going to be spending most of their time, especially in the morning and in the evening before bedtime, to make sure that you're economically enabling a circadian-based solution. Maybe you don't need a tunable solution in the kitchen if they're not spending much time there, but you do need a tunable-based solution in their office or their bedroom. So you need to have those types of conversations. We've spent most of this AIA presentation talking about the physiological health component of circadian lighting. But I would also like us to discuss the fact that light has a powerful psychological wellness impact on us, and to discuss the gamut of solutions of how dynamic light can impact wellness. Tunable based solutions can be scientifically designed to help satisfy circadian regulation, but they can also be used to create a sense of wellness by bringing the outdoors in or create an impression on our senses to influence how we perceive the space around us. Light and wellness can encompass much more than just our sleep wake cycle. In this project, for Children's Hospital of Philadelphia's Medical Behavioral Unit that specializes in depression, anxiety, and autism, the design team implemented a more scientific implementation of circadian lighting. They used biophilic design elements, decorative features with nature, and tuned the indoor lights to mimic the brightness and color spectrum of the sun as it changes during the day to help reduce agitation and improve sleep. In office environments, such as Campari's headquarters, they want their employees to be productive yet comfortable. Their space transitions from day to night to create an immersive environment for their employees. Hospitality locations, such as 151 in New York, can use dynamic lighting to create different scenes based on the daily activities. We've all been in a restaurant that transitions from its lunchtime service to dinner service by a waiter sliding a dimmer switch. At 151, they transition seamlessly between coffee in the morning, lunchtime at midday, and happy hour in the evening. An example of a strictly aesthetic use of dynamic lighting is Christie's Auction House. They tune the lighting in their gallery to match the time of day in which the artist creating the piece. This allows the viewer to see the colors as the painter did. For example, Monet's water lilies would be lit with a daytime hue, while a Dutch master's work would be lit with the warm hue of candlelight. Light is a powerful force on our daily lives. And with the latest research, I'm excited to see the evolution of how we use light in our spaces. The main takeaways from this presentation that I hope you take with you are: 1, our built environments need to consider the circadian entrainment impact on their occupants. Metrics must be utilized both in the planning process and as part of a post-occupancy survey to ensure the proper implementation. The entire design team and the client needs to be involved when designing for circadian lighting. And lastly, the vertical illuminance needs to be considered when designing these types of spaces. Please let me know what questions you have, and I'd be happy to answer them. On behalf of USAI Lighting, thank you for your time.